The 30th of January, 1933, Germany. Adolf Hitler, the leader of the Nazi Party, is appointed Chancellor of Germany and aims to lead the German master race to victory in the racial struggle against those deemed as inferior peoples, especially the Jews. The Nazi regime quickly begins to restrict the civil and human rights of the Jewish people and gradually excludes them from professions, businesses, and public spaces. The first concentration camp, Dachau, is established less than 2 months after Hitler became the Chancellor. Between 1933 and 1945, Nazi Germany and its European allies would establish more than 44,000 camps and other incarceration sites, including ghettos. The perpetrators would use these locations for forced labor, detention of people deemed to be enemies of the state, and the mass murder of millions. One such perpetrator is a German Nazi commandant, Hans Aumeier. Hans Aumeier was born on the 20th of August, 1906, in Amberg, then part of the German Empire. In 1918, at the age of 12, he left school without any qualifications to take up an apprenticeship as a turner and fitter in a local rifle factory following his father's career. In 1923, he left the small factory in Amberg and began to work for a bigger rifle company in Munich. In 1925, Aumeier tried to join the Reichswehr, the German army, but failed. He then returned to the rifle factory in Munich, and until 1926 he worked in similar factories in Berlin, Bremen, and Cologne. Throughout the period 1926 to 1929, Aumeier moved from one job to another, taking part-time work and summer jobs in order to survive. In August 1929, Aumeier became one of the earliest members of the SS with the identification number 2700, and soon after joining the organization, he belonged to the Munich staff of Reichsführer Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS. The SS, Schutzstaffel, or protection squads, was originally established in April 1925 to protect Adolf Hitler and other Nazi leaders and speakers and provide security for political meetings. SS members were subject to strict military discipline and swore an oath of complete loyalty to Hitler and those appointed by him. In January 1929, Heinrich Himmler became the head of the SS, and the organization greatly expanded in size and strength. By the time Hitler came into power in January 1933, Himmler had made the SS the dominant organization within the Reich. From the beginning of the Nazi regime, Hitler entrusted the SS, first and foremost, with the removal and eventual murder of political and so-called racial enemies of the regime. The SS became a virtual state within a state in Nazi Germany and was staffed by men who perceived themselves as the racial elite of the Nazi future. From 1939, the SS assumed responsibility for solving the so-called Jewish question, which then culminated in 1941 when the leadership planned, coordinated, and directed the so-called final solution. This solution was the genocide of European Jews during World War II, also known as the Holocaust. SS officers were directly responsible for the management of concentration camps, where millions of Jews were murdered by poison gas. One such officer became Hans Aumeier, whose career in concentration camps began in January 1934 at Dachau, situated near Munich. Established in March 1933, it was the first regular concentration camp built by the Nazi government. In October 1933, Dachau's Commandant, Theodor Eicher, introduced a system of regulations which inflicted brutal punishments on prisoners for the slightest offenses. Eicher ensured that the Dachau camp served as a model for all later concentration camps. It also became a training center or school of violence for SS guards who were deployed throughout the concentration camp system. Dachau concentration camp was a place where many Nazi guards, such as Hans Aumeier, learned how to torture the prisoners that they supervised and how to get the maximum amount of work out of them whilst they were still alive. In April 1936, Aumeier was deployed as a guard in the Esterwegen concentration camp, located near the German-Dutch border. Most of the prisoners in Esterwegen were political prisoners, many of them communists. The most famous was Karl von Ossietzky, a German journalist and political activist, who was sent to Esterwegen in 1933. For his work in exposing the clandestine German rearmament, he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1935. However, Ossietzky was forbidden from traveling to Norway and accepting the prize, and after years of starvation, mistreatment and torture in various Nazi concentration camps, Ossietzky died 3 years later in 1938 in Berlin. In December 1936, Aumeier became an independent commander of the guard company in the Lichtenburg camp. Housed in a Renaissance castle, Lichtenburg was among the first concentration camps to be built by the Nazis and was operated by the SS from 1933 to 1939. From 1937 to 1939, it held only female prisoners. One of the camp's most notorious guards was Maria Mundel, whose specialty at Lichtenburg was to strip the prisoners naked, tie them to wooden posts, and beat them mercilessly until she could no longer lift her arm. Between 1937 and 1938, Aumeier held the same position at Buchenwald, and in August 1938, he served as camp director and deputy commandant at Flossenbürg concentration camp. Flossenbürg's original purpose was to exploit the forced labor of prisoners for the production of granite for Nazi construction projects. Until mid-1943, when the camp became a key supplier of Messerschmitt Bf 109 aircraft parts, the quarry occupied the labor of about half the prisoner population. In his position, Aumeier was responsible for the operation of the camp, maintaining order and taking care of daily routines and roll calls. At Flossenbürg, Aumeier created such harsh living conditions for the prisoners that they often committed suicide. He often personally carried out executions, punished prisoners personally with whipping, and ordered long and extremely tiring roll calls. In addition, exclusively for Poles, Aumeier introduced the punitive standing punishments in the camp, which lasted from 12 to 42 hours. The standing punishment consisted of standing to attention in ranks without food, drink, or a chance to go to the toilet and without making the slightest movement. One such standing punishment started with 628 people and finished with less than 500. The rest were beaten to death, and among them, 46 people were shot on Aumeier's orders, who selected them personally and was present at the execution. In January 1942, Hans Aumeier arrived in Auschwitz, becoming deputy commandant of Auschwitz concentration camp. His duties included taking care of order in the camp, overseeing the food and clothing of the prisoners, and matters related to their forced labor. Aumeier terrorized the camp and became known as a cruel sadist with no limits. He not only signed off on the death sentences, but also conducted them himself, often with his fellow Nazi colleague Gerhard Palitsch. Even during work, he would beat and torment the prisoners whenever he could. He claimed that any prisoner living in the conditions created by him could not survive for longer than 3 months. Aumeier practically became the master of life and death of the Auschwitz prisoners, and he gave the capos and guards far-reaching power, which led to an increase of terror in the camp. He once said, "Only a dead prisoner is a decent prisoner." He hated Poles and used to call them, "You Polish pigs." On Aumeier's orders, 144 women were shot on the 19th of March, 1942, at the execution wall in the courtyard of blocks 10 and 11. On the 27th of May, 1942, he was present at a mass execution of 168 prisoners who were shot in the same way. On that day, approximately 400 Polish political prisoners were forced into the penal company. Prisoners were assigned to the penal companies for various reasons, such as escape attempts, contact with civilians, or the illegal possession of food, money, additional clothing or family photographs, or sluggishness at work, in the opinion of the SS supervisors. They performed the hardest labor, usually at double time or on the run, and they were liable to be beaten continually by SS men and prisoner functionaries. Of the above-mentioned 400 prisoners, every few days, the Germans selected several prisoners from among the penal company and shot them. The threat of death hovering over the prisoners made them think up a plan to flee. On the 10th of June, 1942, Polish prisoners in the penal company mutinied and attempted to escape while working in the drainage ditch in Birkenau. Only 9 of them made it to freedom. In reprisal, the SS executed 20 prisoners by shooting and murdered more than 300 Poles from the penal company in the gas chamber. Hans Aumeier took part in these reprisals. Aumeier was known to all the prisoners for beating and kicking them for the slightest fault. For example, failure to march to the pace and rhythm of the orchestra. He was an alcoholic and used to shoot prisoners for no reason when he was drunk. On one occasion during a bread delivery, the little bits of bread were removed from the wagon and thrown to the ground. After the hungry prisoners pounced on them, Aumeier ran up, began to disperse the inmates, and punched them. After the war, Auschwitz survivors testified that whenever Hans Aumeier appeared, the SS men who supervised the work would begin to behave with great cruelty towards the prisoners, yell at them, and beat them even more. Aumeier was also active in selections on the rail ramp, when arrivals, lined up into 2 columns, were selected for labor or for work. Hans Aumeier used to steal the belongings of the murdered victims, including gold, and after the camp's commandant, Rudolf Hirst, discovered this, as a punishment in mid-August 1943, he sent Aumeier to construct and establish Vaivara concentration camp in Estonia. Since the main purpose of the camps was the fullest exploitation of the work capacity of their inmates, no large-scale killings of the able-bodied took place in the camps. Prisoners had to work in the nearby forest, a quarry, or in the oil shale extraction. Hans Aumeier became the camp's commandant, and under his supervision, the camp's personnel carried out selections of the inmates who were too old or too sick to work. Between August 1943 and February 1944, when the camp was operational, more than 1,000 men, women and children were shot to death in the nearby woods. In December 1944, Aumeier became a commandant of Kaufering, which was the common name of the system of 11 subcamps of the Dachau concentration camp system. The conditions in Kaufering were horrible. The prisoners deported to each of the 11 subcamps had to construct the accommodation themselves. The resulting huts, partially buried for camouflage from aerial reconnaissance, were completely inadequate for the weather conditions. Rain and snow leaked through the earthen roofs, and vermin infested the huts. Prisoners had to sleep on straw that had been spread on the floor. What little food the prisoners did have was taken by the SS guards, and those who were sick were fed even less. There were even incidents of cannibalism, and some prisoners were so desperate to escape from their horrible reality that they would try to commit suicide by throwing themselves into the electrical fencing. At Kaufering, Aumeier abused and killed the prisoners, as well as willfully neglecting their care. During Kaufering camp's existence between June 1944 and April 1945, 15,000 out of 30,000 prisoners died from hunger, disease, executions, or during death marches. In January 1945, Hans Aumeier took over as commandant of the Grini police prison camp in Nazi-occupied Norway. He treated prisoners here in a completely different way than in previous camps. Aumeier was lenient towards them, collaborated with the Norwegian Red Cross, even letting them enter the camp, and on the 7th of May, 1945, he released the prisoners and closed the camp. Thanks to MI6, the British Secret Intelligence Service, he was captured in his SS uniform by the British forces on the 11th of June, 1945. In the following year, he was extradited to Poland, where he was tried at the Auschwitz trial, which began on the 24th of November, 1947, and lasted 1 month. At the trial, he claimed he knew nothing about the gas chambers, and that he never killed anyone, and neither had any of his men. He even stated that the evidence against him was based on witnesses who were haunting him with their hatred. He also stated that if he was found guilty and sentenced to death, he would die as a scapegoat for Germany. In addition, Aumeier claimed that he had repeatedly demanded from his superiors to be sent to the front, but his requests were not met. However, his lies did not help him escape justice. On the 22nd of December, 1947, the Polish Supreme National Tribunal in Krakow sentenced Aumeier to death by hanging. He was 41 years old when he was executed on the 24th of January, 1948. There were no tears shed for Hans Aumeier. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.